we've had many times where the first several engagements are promising and a hands-on interview demonstrates things that weren't visible. And then if it's a executive position, we strive to do dinner, hopefully even dinner with the spouses, because sometimes that's the biggest impact to your company's culture might be the spouse of an employee.
And we know if you're hiring a gentleman executive, if mama gives the thumbs up, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and I don't want to be facetious, but if you've got a grand employee and their spouse is a lunatic, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Is there really a lunatic meter that you see at dinner? Have you seen that?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Welcome to another edition of the ABD Leadership Podcast, a collection of CSRA thought leaders providing insight to help your company survive and thrive. Here's Augusta Business Daily publisher, Neil Gordon.
Hi again. Thanks so much for being part of this podcast journey with me. We like to begin each program with a segment we call Good Deeds. We're going to talk about Classic Collision. You may have passed by their auto body shop on Washington Road in the old Bourne Toyota. They have another location that's in Aiken and another one in Grovetown. Well, the company as a whole, headquartered in Atlanta, reached 100 locations over the summer. What did the corporate team do but crisscross the country, stopping at Augusta and handing a wad, $101 bills to every employee. There's 82 in the CSRA. That's $8,200 times 100 locations. By the way, in September, they reached 150 locations. Maybe more cash is coming the way of the appreciated employees. That's good deed indeed. We'll have more on the website at augustabusinessdaily.com. Well, say hello to Patrick Reynolds, the founder and CEO of CrossLink Consulting. How are you, sir?
Couldn't be better.
Great. Just for those of you who don't know, CrossLink Consulting handles IT and cybersecurity needs for folks in the CSRA. But the purpose of our podcast series has little to do with technology and much more to do with people and making a bit of a culture shift across the CSRA. Just wondering why that's so important to you.
Well, it's primarily important because our company went through a period of bad culture, and it was painful. It was painful every day to come in and try and do what we're called to do when there's tension and animosity, and the workplace isn't a delight to come in and serve others.
Was it the case of one bad apple spoiling the whole bunch, or how did that evolve?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, when I started CrossLink in 2004, it was a one-man operation, and it was easy to control the client experience. Culture started and stopped with me. But as we've grown and as we've added people to continue to serve this community with IT and cyber, not everyone has the same values. Not everyone comes to the workplace seeking the same things. And what I found, like many companies have found or are finding, is that culture is going to crop up. It's going to exist. It's going to build, unbeknownst to you, or unmanaged and uncultivated by the leadership if you're not careful.
What strikes me about that is, so you're the leader. Are you able to observe little nuances, say, within your company of good culture, bad culture? And I'm just wondering if there are any warning signs for anybody that happens to be watching or listening to look for.
So in general, it's really not terribly different from how our homes run and how our homes feel. I come from a family of five. My wife and I have 3 kids as well, so that's a family of 5. And through that process, you learn what not to do more easily than I think you learn what to do. And the same is true in the workplace. And there's patterns of behavior that are going to contribute to downward spiraling culture. And so, yes, I know how to look for some of those, and I think that other leaders can learn to look for some of those and actively counter some of those. It's not obvious how a short remark is going to ultimately lead to bigger problems, but it can be an indicator. And as a leader who cares about the culture of the company, because it's been so painful in the past, we're intentional to address those as quickly as possible.
So you mentioned the home life. Is the work life more like a family, or is it a organization?
This has been a hard lesson for me to learn. I think we all want to talk about how we have family values at work and how we're one big happy family. And I hear a lot of people say the same thing. We did as well. I've come to take a different perspective on that ultimately, which is we're not a family, we're a team.
What's the difference? That's it seems you think about, I'm a sports fan. You think about, and I'm from New York, so you think about, the New York Mets and the Jets, and boy, they're a team and they must go out and have a meal together. Their wives must get together. It must be like a family, but no.
So I think the biggest difference for us in business is we have a mission to do. A family doesn't really have a mission. You're coexisting, you're living life with one another, trying to get along. Many times the objective is to try and get along. Whereas at work, there's a mission to do. And at CrossLink, there's a mission to do. We've got great clients that we strive to serve. And then in leadership, not only are we still trying to serve those clients, but we're striving to shepherd others who are doing the same thing. And so that mission is the main difference between a family and a team. And if you think about that, because we're a team, every great team, certainly every high-performing team has a coach. And that's very much what I see my role. Leon, our operations manager, that's his role. There's a lot of coaching and shepherding that we're intentional to do because the mission is important. And if we're not coaching and we're not mentoring and we're not focusing others on what that mission is, then I think the problems grow. And the more we're focused on the mission, the smaller the problems are. And when everyone's rowing in the same direction and a bump comes because, hey, that's how it is in families as well as in teams. When you're all rowing in the same direction and the mission and the destination are clear, it's a lot less distracting when those bumps come.
So you mentioned the word shepherd. You mentioned the word serve. Now, you didn't speak of anything spiritually, but it sounds to me more like a mission of what might be like what the church is versus necessarily like what the family is. Is there some components of that?
For me personally, there's no distinction. For me personally, there's not a separation between what I worship and what I do at work. What I've come to embrace is that work is a form of worship. It's an extension of my worship. To think about that for some of our audience who may not appreciate that or may not care quite as deeply as we do, the things that we do are going to reflect what we're serving. If we're serving our wallets, then the things that we put priority on are going to serve our wallets. If we're driven to be the best for whatever reason, then the decisions we make are going to serve that goal. And for me personally and for our leadership team, what we're striving to do is exercise the gifts that we've been given, and we recognize that we've been granted those gifts, and we're striving to use those gifts according to our call as we serve our neighbors.
Right.
So not everyone on our team thinks that exact same way, and that's okay. But they are all handpicked and shepherded because of that servant-hearted attitude. So I hope that resounds with some of our listeners that that maybe the faith component isn't necessarily paramount, but the desire to execute their mission cohesively. I think that without focusing on culture and without cultivating and curating what that culture looks like, their mission can't really be executed as well as it could be.
Good. Understood. And if you didn't know, he's a good soul. I think I can say that. That's okay. We're going to just have a little short break in a moment, and we're going to have some nuggets for you, some things Patrick has learned, I guess, through studying others who have a lot of really important steps to share about good culture. But again, we're with Patrick Reynolds, CEO and founder of CrossLink Consulting. They're headquartered in North Augusta, serving IT and cyber security needs. And this is our first of many podcasts. This is the first time that I've done interviews, although I visited the studio. What do you think so far?
I think it's great. This is a fantastic studio. It's got great audio, great cameras, and David over there leading the charge is doing a fantastic job as well.
Yeah, David and Chris are, I like to call them the 20-something millennials that are teaching everyone a new way to get the word out, which is really great. We all try to learn and we try to grow. And they have a website at augustapodcast.com, and they do all sorts of things from recording for businesses to recording for organizations. They even do voiceovers if you want to have something nice on your answering machine, if you will. You just got back from, well, kind of a cross-country tour of travel for many different reasons, but specifically you went to a trade show. And what did you bring back that you think might be important for people who are working at companies in some sort of leadership positions or who own the companies?
It's a big question. So this is a event that I went to in 2019, and I was driven to do that because our culture was in a place that was uncomfortable. Our workplace was less desirable to come in each day. There was friction. There was some caustic attitudes. So I was hungering and thirsting for some tools and some low-hanging fruit, some quick wins on how to shift the culture at CrossLink. And that was a very empowering conference. I came back and immediately began to begin wrestling that culture in the right direction, stopping some of the negative dissent, if you will, and beginning to focus on improving it. And there are some real easy things that companies can do to begin to focus on it. Just to get into some practical components that we started doing right away, we immediately started tailing our Fridays down at about 4 o'clock so that we could just share and live life with one another. That started with some root beer, floats on Friday, starting about 4 o'clock. It was summertime when we started that, and just let's end the workday at 4. We've got someone on call who can take care of those last-minute emergencies, but let's spend at least an hour doing some cornhole,
right?
Enjoying some downtime with one another in the office. And we also started changing up our morning meetings, our morning huddles. We hadn't been nearly as intentional, but we began to do those 4 days a week, and at the start of each of those, we started tossing around these thumb balls that are sort of icebreaker thumb balls that asks some pointed questions, and you answer the question that your thumb is on, and you toss it to somebody else. But it is a great way to get to know your coworkers and be a little more vulnerable yourself with some of the answers, and you get to pick how vulnerable you are.
And I experienced some of that. I guess it was back in May. Your company came over to Augusta Business Daily, and you were at our boardroom, and it was really interesting that you were just sort of sharing the wins for the week, and I didn't notice any root beer floats, but there were some nice refreshments for whatever anyone wanted, including ice cream and such, and it was just really nice. I just came away thinking, I was telling my wife, that's a great company to work for and work with. People felt valued. That's what I thought.
Yeah. So what you saw also was us bringing in one of the leaders of the clients that we serve. So one of those companies that we serve.
David.
Yep. And we had him come in and just discuss some of the impact that our team has made on his company. And that wasn't, we weren't trying to toot our own horn. It was really to help technicians and engineers who can get very narrowly focused to see some of the big picture impact of what serving people, the way we strive to do, what that means in the companies and in the lives of the people that we serve.
Well, you're very humble. You speaking of David, that of course I have a bottled water. I don't know if it came from Southern Beverage, and I don't know if it's springtime water, but the CEO and founder David had some challenges with a different provider, and he shared how your team made life much easier for him and his employees to go about the important business of digging 900 feet underneath the ground to come up with good H2O. And you're right. I thought that was a nice touch. I'd never seen that before, where a client was invited to speak in front of 20 people.
Yeah, it's really, that is just one of the components, right? But getting everyone understanding what the mission is and the impact of the mission, again, it just goes back to building culture and focusing on the mission that we're doing. When we're focused on that mission, little hiccups in the office have a lot less impact.
Later in October, you at your own expense or the company's own expense, you're going to fly in a member of a company, I think out west. Is that right?
They're based out of Colorado.
Colorado. And they're going to share, we're going to work together on a business expo, a bit of a trade show on culture shift, just to try to help everyone get a lot better and serve their clients better. And that gentleman had some really interesting steps that he shared. What really resonated with you?
Well, so the name of the program is called the Collaborative Way. And it really is it's probably some of the best material that I recognize is so good in hindsight, right? After going through many of the problems that we've gone through in growing and seeing culture not being curated and managed, recognizing where some of the problems and flaws came. As I've read their book and talked with the teachers of that program, it's become evident to me that our community, any business really, but our community would really benefit from having some of those ideas taught to them. Obviously, in this expo, it's not the normal 3-day workshop, and we're going to have a lot of other speakers during this expo, but to get Declan from the Collaborative Way down here for that day, several sessions, to be able to teach some of our folks just the high-level perspectives, it's going to be very empowering. If they come to the conference and just learn some of those, the main point, those 5 main points about how to keep culture going in the right direction, and what when we digress from growing good culture, they're very clear in those 5 points. It's going to be really empowering. Really, I think it's going to change, what you and I have talked about since the beginning of this expo concept is the greatest good that we can think about doing is helping companies embrace and shift their culture, because that's going to change the lives of the leadership at those companies. It's going to change the lives of the employees at those companies, and it's going to have tremendous impact on the people they serve. And if we can see that vision come to fruition through this expo, that's a tremendous reward.
And another byproduct is if you are happy at work or if you're happy leading a company, you're probably happier at home. There's probably is some work-life balance that's a benefit.
In fact, people who attend the expo, they're going to, from just the collaborative way approach, it's going to probably influence the way a lot of people go home and speak to their spouses and children. So it isn't just learning how to collaborate and what a collaborative approach is. It's going to have impact outside of the workplace as well.
Well, this has been a great first chat, and I hope we've whet your appetite. There's so much more we're going to cover over the coming weeks and months. And as we have more information about our expo to shift culture across the CSRA, we'll share it with you here and in some other platforms. But Patrick, just thank you so much for quarterbacking this overarching effort. I think it's for the greater good.
Thank you, Dale. It's a pleasure to do it, and I can't wait to hear how it's impacted some of our neighbors.
All right. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks.
The ABD podcast series is presented by Augusta Business Daily, CrossLink Consulting Services, Tab CSRA, and Best Office Solutions.
Wow, hard to believe it's been about a year since that awful fire at T's restaurant in South Augusta. And of late, there's been some confusion out on the internet and social media on Facebook about whether T's will reopen or not, particularly because there was a post about T's number 2 opening in the old About Time and Dandelions restaurant on Georgia Avenue in North Augusta. So we called Garrett Fulcher, the owner of T's, and he confirmed that, yes, T's number 1 will be reopening spring, summer of 2022, and his daughter will be occupying this building to do catering under the name of T's Downtown. If you'd like to read more about this, please go to AugustaBusinessDaily.com. There's plenty of local business news. We're continuing on our journey to make a culture shift across the CSRA with Patrick Reynolds, the CEO and founder of CrossLink Consulting. I'm Neil Gordon from Augusta Business Daily. How are you, sir?
Couldn't be better.
Wonderful. We're going to talk about the talent aspect of the culture shift. I have someone I've known for decades, Gary Gibson, been in business for 38 years in the CSRA. People know him as Gary's Hamburgers, several locations. He had 4, he now has 3, and it wasn't because people were not buying enough hamburgers or chicken strips. His longtime manager, Patrick, decided to retire. He'd gotten of the age that he wanted to enjoy himself a little. And for months and months, Gary has been unable to find a replacement. It was down to 5 employees at the Wheeler Road location. A lot of other business owners are facing this. At CrossLink, how do you invite in good talent and retain them?
It's a big question. This was actually a giant struggle for me, and I'll just see if I can't say it real vulnerably. I knew that what we could pay employees was very different from what folks can make at the Fort and what folks can make at the site. Right? We got the Fort and we got the site. This culminated my hang-ups culminated in me having a candidate who was, I was interviewing for a position, and when I found out what the guy made, I pretty much told him, look, you've really got a good gig. You need to stay where you're at.
You talked yourself out of an employee.
And I was telling my business coach at the time about it, and she said, well, let me ask you, Patrick, would you work at the site? And I'm like, no, I would never. It's a soulless job. To me, it's just not what I'm driven and called to do. Mm-hmm. I would not do it. And she said, well, you denied him the opportunity to change. Because of your hang-ups about your pay scale, you denied him the right to look at this opportunity. Honestly look at it. And she was right. I did a lot of soul searching, and it took me a long time to really get a grasp on why CrossLink is a great place to work, how it's very, very different from other places to work. For the right person, me included, there's just not another place where we get to serve the way we get to serve a select, curated list of clients and do what we're made to do and called to do. So once I got my handle around that, my head around that concept, it was much easier for us to begin to write a job description that embodied that. That narrative in our job description tells that story. Respondents often say it was a delightful experience to apply for this position, which I don't think is common, but we've crafted that narrative to properly reflect what's different. And so I hope that's an encouragement to our listeners that when they're competing in the marketplace, just like every other business owner, they're trying to find the best talent, and they're trying to find them at a salary that they can pay. That's certainly been a challenge for us as well. We're not any different. And if anyone knows about the IT field, you know that it's starved for talent. It's one of we're all familiar with how the nursing shortage from the 90s and 2000s, even through today, I believe the tech talent deficit is much greater. So we've focused on culture. We've focused on the things that make us different. We've focused on that servant-hearted attitude, and that's a very divisive message.
Sure. Now, how picky should employers be, and how picky are you when you have a job search?
We have run several jobs with over 100 applicants and chosen to hire none of them.
Why?
We don't want to settle. It's too important to all the things that we've talked about, the culture and the way in which we serve clients. So I think that a mistake, we've certainly made the mistake in the past. It's a mistake many businesses make, is they get what they can afford. They make compromises because it's what they can afford. And Reed Hastings has a book out, and one of the ideas in that book, which we subscribe to, is you need to increase your talent density. If the right employee costs more than you're comfortable paying, it's going to be the most cost-effective thing you can do is to get the right employee, even if that means someone else has to go or two other people has to go. That's a hard point that he makes, but it's a very valid point. You just can't afford to compromise when you're employing people who are going to represent your brand and represent your mission.
I often compare business to sports, and it's kind of competitive like that on a team. I mean, if you're not really performing to the A level, you may go down to AAA or AA. Similar in a way.
Yeah, and it's hard to overstate what the wrong hire can do, the impact that the wrong hire can have on the culture inside the business, the other employees, and how they serve clients, as well as the clients that you have. We have certainly made mistakes. We have certainly hurt or eroded relationships with clients because we didn't have the right team or the right team member. So it's incredibly important to hold out for the right person, and to steadily shepherd that person into who they need to be to serve and further the company's mission. And when that begins to not be correctable, to make changes as quickly as possible.
Well, we're here really creating a culture shift in the CSRA over the next several weeks and months and looking at a lot of different aspects. It's been a difficult time really since March of 2020, finding the right talent, retaining them, and we're going to delve into that so much over the course of the next several months. And I often remember one of my business attorneys and friends that I've had, Ed Enoch, for many, many years, he wrote an article, and the headline was, "Hire slow, fire fast." Do you subscribe to that method?
Yeah, I don't voice it that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's too pat. It doesn't really describe the struggles of people who care about their employees. It doesn't convey the real struggle because, we invest in people. We invest heavily in people. And hopefully our listeners do as well. And that's not an easy thing to pull the plug on. But when you begin to take that attitude of we're not a family, we're a team, it has been empowering for me and other people that I've spoken with. The idea that, like a good team, occasionally players need to be traded. Mm. And when a player gets traded, the coach doesn't take them out back and stab them.
Right.
They're going to be fine. They're going to go down to AAA. They're going to work on the problems that they had. They're going to continue in their career. And hopefully it's better for it because they had a chance to focus on an area of need. But to continue to keep that player on the team, it's hurting the rest of the team, and it's hurting the mission of the team. It's hurting all the people that team serves.
Sometimes it's not the right fit, or there's a better fit, of course. And you mentioned you had over 100 applicants for a previous position. Have you reposted for the same position, or do you have a different position open?
Interestingly, we have 2 positions running at the moment, and they're both well on their way to over 100 applicants.
And do you feel better about these 100 applicants?
Yeah, in each case, our attitude is, hey, whatever you want to do, Lord. If we get 100 applicants and none of them are the right applicant, that's okay. We'll do our part. But when we rerun it, it's surprising how different things shape up the second time. And that's proving to be the case this time as well. 3 months later, running an ad again that we didn't fill the first time. Mm-hmm. We've already had better applicants, more promising applicants. So it's delightful.
What type of tools do you use to determine whether someone is a good fit or not?
It's fairly extensive. It's grown to probably about a 10 to 12 contact process. Mm-hmm. So we of course post an ad with a good narrative, a good job description, what the requirements are, and those requirements are not conventional requirements on our postings. They really boil down to the quality of person. And again, I've written those to try and be divisive. But that's the starting point, right? Having a job description or a narrative that helps me capture what we're really looking for. And then there are probably about 15 minutes worth of questions, maybe even longer, that an applicant has to answer before their application is even seen by us. And several of those are open-ended questions that help us understand who the client is, who the applicant is, and what their values are. So we're always looking for cultural fit. We then conduct a 15-minute interview for those that look promising, 15-minute phone interview, which is just a giant time saver. For those that are promising there, we'll bring in for an hour in-person interview. And then for any of the technical roles, we finish that up with at least one hands-on technical interview, which is incredibly telling. We've had many times where the first several engagements are promising and a hands-on interview demonstrates things that weren't visible. And then if it's a executive position, we strive to do dinner, hopefully even dinner with the spouses, because sometimes that's the biggest impact to your company's culture, might be the spouse of an employee.
And we know if you're hiring a gentleman executive, if mama gives the thumbs up, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and I don't want to be facetious, but if you've got a grand employee and their spouse is a lunatic, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Is there really a lunatic meter that you see at dinner? Have you seen that?
Absolutely.
Wow. That sounds like the subject of a different podcast.
Well, it's just hard to overstate how important that is.
Wow.
In much the same way that you don't just marry your bride or your groom, you marry the family. The same is true. I at least see the same thing being true with the folks that we bring on board.
And then the red flags go up, and you may not make that offer.
That's right.
The last step. Interesting. Well, we hope this has been really helpful. Some nuggets from Patrick Reynolds, who's been hiring people in the CSRA now for about 20 years. The website is crosslinkconsulting.net. Do you have positions posted online? And
we do, yes.
Oh, that's good to know. And over the course of the next several weeks, we're going to continue to try to shift the culture upward to make things better with your company. And thanks for what you're doing here. This is really a great mission, and we appreciate you.
Thank you for joining me on it.
Sure.
Thanks for joining us on the ABD Leadership Podcast, presented by Augusta Business Daily, CrossLink Consulting Services, Tab CSRA, and Best Office Solutions.